Hi, I'm Adrienne from Sew PDF, and in this video I'm going to show you how to sew the Kodiak hoodie from Toby K Patterns. This version that I'm sewing in the video has zippered welt pockets and the collar. There is also a hood option, and there are regular welt pockets in the pattern. Stay tuned to the end and I'll tell you more about the fit of this pattern and how to choose the right size. Now, I just want to note before we go into the sewing steps that you'll see that I sewed some of the seams on a sewing machine and some of them on a serger. There is no method to that madness. I simply was having trouble deciding whether I wanted white thread on my serger to match the inside of my fabric, or if I wanted black thread on my serger to match the outside of the fabric. In hindsight, I probably should have used black thread in my needles and white thread in my loopers, but it's been a long week and I think we all know what it's like to sew tired. So the first step of the Kodiak hoodie is to sew either your collar or your hood. So I'm doing the collar for this example, but if you were doing a hood, then you would want to sew the seams of your hood, your main hood, and your hood lining before you apply the snaps. Because the diagrams in the tutorial show you where to place the snaps and the grommets if you're using those. And because the pattern pieces are on a fold, the markings for both the right and left of the collar or hood are on the pattern piece itself. So you're going to need the diagram to know which ones to use for the right and which ones to use for the left. So I've used the diagram, placed my collar pieces right sides up, and looked at the diagram and saw that the snaps on the lining needed to be at the little hexagon markings on the pattern piece on the right hand side. So I placed those markings on the back, and then I fused the interfacing on the back and placed my snaps. And again, same with the main, I saw that the circle with the square around it was meant to be this female snap, and so I marked it on the back, fused the interfacing, and placed the snap. There will be another snap on the bodice piece, but I'll show you that later. So now we want to sew the lining to the main. So just going to put that right sides together and sew around this long edge here. And if it was the hood, then it would be the same. You'd put the lining and the main together and sew around the front edge. Next, it's time to do the welt pockets if you're doing those. I'm going to show you how to do the zippered welt pockets, but if you want to do a regular welt pocket, there is a separate video for that, and I've linked that in the description of this video. But it's also linked in the pattern tutorial if you want to grab it from there. So the first step of the zippered welt pocket is to draw your rectangle on the wrong side of one of your pocket pieces. Actually, two of your pocket pieces. You'll need to draw this on the wrong side. And the tutorial says to draw it 1.5 inches down from the top. So I put the bottom of my rectangle 1.5 inches down from the top, and that worked well for me. And your rectangle should be 3/8 of an inch tall, and the width is stated in the tutorial. So for most sizes, it's going to be 5 3/4 inch wide. But if you're doing the teen sizes or some of the upper sizes, then it will be slightly different. Now, the instructions on the tutorial are for you to draw the regular welt placement using the pattern piece, and then place your pocket so that it covers that original set of placement marks. But what I've done instead is I've actually drawn my rectangle on both sides of my pocket, and I've also drawn a smaller rectangle. You can see where the original rectangle was, that larger one, and I've drawn the smaller one in the middle. So if you wanted to use this method, then this would allow you to not have to wash off the larger rectangle afterwards. I'm still going to have to do that because I did draw the larger rectangle, but if you wanted to avoid having to wash that, then you would want to just draw the smaller rectangle from the beginning and not draw the larger one. So if you've got the larger rectangle, then as per the tutorial, you would just place the pocket so that it covers that large rectangle. centered over it with the top edge just over those placement marks. And then you would just sew your smaller rectangle that you drew on the pocket piece. But if you drew the smaller rectangles, then what you're going to need to do is match those up. So the pocket and the bodice should be right sides together. And you're just going to lift up the corners slightly so you can see the rectangle and make sure that they match. And place those smaller rectangles right on top of each other. And this would allow you to not need to wash it afterwards, although you might have a little bit of your marks peeking out around the edges of your pocket. Either way, the next step is to sew that rectangle, and you want to take it slow and sew exactly on your lines all the way around. And you can use a regular shorter straight stitch for this. You don't need to use a stretch stitch or a longer straight stitch like you normally would when top stitching knits. So there we go. I've sewn my rectangle, and as you can see, I pinned it in place to make sure it didn't move while I was sewing it. So I'm going to take those pins out, and now what you're going to do is draw a line in the middle like so, and then draw diagonal lines out to the corner. This does not need to be exact, any kind of measurements. The tutorial actually gives measurements for the regular pocket, so it doesn't need to be ½ inch in from the end or anything like that, just so that your diagonal lines are approximately in the middle of that corner. Then what you're going to do is cut along those lines. And when you're snipping those corners, you want to get as close as you can to the stitches without cutting through them. Then you're going to push the pocket through the hole. Flip it so it's wrong sides together. And you're going to press that. Okay, so the next step is to place your zipper in that hole. So the zipper needs to be face down in the pocket hole. And first you want to pin or tape it in place. I prefer to use double-sided tape. I just find it much easier than pins because you can leave it in place while you're sewing. All right, make sure your rectangle is not distorted. You want it to be still the 3/8 of an inch high. Place the zipper pull as close as you can get it to the edge of the hole. There we go. Now, there are two ways to sew this in place. The tutorial suggests that you sew through the lining only, and just basically you're going to re-sew that rectangle. So you're going to sew through the lining and the zipper around the previous rectangle. But I find it much easier to top stitch it in place. So here you can see what it looks like from the front. So if you were to sew just through the lining and sew the zipper in place that way, then there would be no top stitching around this rectangle and it would stay in place. But I like the look of top stitching the rectangle, so I did that. And here you can see my finished one. So I've got the rectangle all top stitched in place. And then the next step, after you top stitch that rectangle, is to place your other pocket right sides together. Oh, and if you've got extra zipper after you finish the top stitching or stitching it in place, you can just cut off the extra zipper. And then you sew all the way around the edges of the pocket. So this would be cut off, and you would just sew all the way around the edges of the pocket. This one here is finished. And I just did this on my sewing machine, but I'll probably go back over it with a serger later. And that pocket is done. So after the pockets are done, if you are doing pockets, then the next step is to start assembling the sweater. Now, before you sew the zipper, you're going to want to fuse some interfacing or stabilizer to the front edges of the bodice pieces where the zipper will go, and the facing piece. This is the facing piece here. So the first time I made this, I used fusible interfacing, but I found that after being washed, it was starting to peel off and it didn't look very good on the inside. So this time I'm going to use fusible stabilizer, and this is a fusible tearaway stabilizer. So after I'm done sewing the zipper and it's done its job of keeping the fabric from stretching while I sew the zipper, I'm just going to rip that stabilizer right off. And it'll rip off cleanly on either side of the stitches. After that, you're going to need to hem the bottom and the non-interfaced or stabilized side of both the facing and the bodice B piece. That's going to be this long edge here. And you can see the neckline. So this is the shoulder up here. And this is your mark to stop sewing. That will come in later. So the interfacing is going to go on the side with this mark that says to stop here on the pattern piece. So the side that needs to be finished is this other side that doesn't have the interfacing on it, and the bottom edge. So I actually put my stabilizer too far down. So I'm just going to rip off a little bit of that, cut it off. So you're going to fold it 1/2 inch and fold this side 1/2 inch as well. And you're going to sew that down. Now it's best to finish the edge with a zigzag or a serge stitch first, unless you're using a cover stitch, or what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use a honeycomb stitch to sew this, and that will cover both the inside and show on the outside as well. So the raw edges will be completely covered with the stitch. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. And there we go, it's all hemmed. And that is the honeycomb stitch. And it's a little bit wavy, but a press will take that right out. If you like to hem with a twin needle, that will also work for this. Okay, so next we are going to connect the bodice A and bodice B pieces. There is a snap that will eventually go on the bodice B piece, and that was marked on the pattern piece. I have prepped mine by putting interfacing on the back, but you don't want to actually apply the snap until after you've done your zipper, because it will be difficult to sew the zipper past the snap if it's already installed. So on the pattern pieces, there is a line marked on the edge of these two pieces, and that is where you want to sew down to start. We aren't going to sew all the way down yet. We're just going to sew this top bit here, and then the rest of it will be sewn when we put the zipper in. So you're going to fold those right sides together, match up the mark, and pin or clip it. And then sew that little section with the standard seam allowance, which is 3/8 of an inch on this pattern. So after that bit is sewn, then you've got your shoulder all put together, and you're going to sew your shoulder seams. So take your back piece, place it right sides together with bodice A and B, sew your shoulder seam, and you're going to do the same with the other shoulder, which matches up with the other front piece. Okay, so we've got the two shoulders sewn, and now it's time to add the sleeves. So you're going to lay out your armhole, and the front side of the armhole will have a notch, and the back side of the armhole will have a double notch, and those need to be matched up with your sleeve. So looks like I've got the right one here. The double notch is on this side and the single notch is on this side, and the top notch gets matched up with your shoulder seam. Okay, and then you're just going to sew your sleeve in place from one end to the other. So there's the sleeve sewn in place, and the next step is to fold that sleeve in half, match up the seam under the arm, and you're going to sew up the sleeve and down the side seam. Okay, so after the sleeves and side seams are sewn, the next step is going to be to sew your waistband around the bottom edge. Make sure not to catch your pockets in that seam, and you don't want this bodice B piece, which is hemmed at the bottom, you do not want that in with the waistband. So the waistband is going to go around, and I've already folded and clipped mine. So you're going to fold it wrong sides together, and then I've clipped it into even quarters. So now I'm going to divide this bottom part of the sweater into even quarters as well, and then match them up, because the waistband is slightly smaller than the sweater. to cinch it in at the bottom. Okay, time to sew that on, and I'm going to stretch the waistband slightly as I sew it until it matches up with the sweater. Okay, so now it is time to do the zipper. The tutorial gives a length for the zipper that is too long on purpose because it's very difficult to get exactly the right length of zipper. But it's very easy to fold back the top, and I'll show you how to do that. So to measure it, you're going to place it next to your bodice C, which is the wide front part. Line up the bottom with the bottom of your waistband. And then you want to mark the zipper tape 3/4 of an inch down from the top of the bodice. So I've marked mine there. I'm going to unzip it. And then what you want to do is fold back that zipper tape at the mark, and you're going to stitch it in place along that edge there to keep it in place. And there we go. Doesn't have to be pretty, just needs to keep it in place, and you can cut off the extra zipper tape. The way this goes up and down will prevent the zipper pull from coming up the top, so there's no need to put a new stop on it. Here again with the zipper, the double-sided wash-away tape comes in very handy. So I've put a piece down on the bodice C piece, the wide one, along the right side, the front edge. I'm going to peel off the backing and place my zipper right side down. So that's the right side of the zipper. I'm going to put it right side down with the tape, the zipper tape, lining up with the raw edge. Okay, so that's stuck down. Now I could use another piece of tape. We're going to sandwich this zipper with the facing. Personally, I find when you use tape on both sides, it gets a little bulky. So if there's stabilizer being used so it's not going to stretch, then I usually skip the tape for one side of it and just clip it. If you find your facing is a little bit longer than the zipper, you can just trim off the extra at the top. And then you're going to go ahead and sew that edge with the zipper sandwiched in between your facing and your sweater with a zipper foot. And there we go, that's sewn. So I'm going to flip that out. And then the next step would be to top stitch that zipper in place. Which I think I'm actually going to skip because of my fabric choices. I don't really want to do dark top stitching on my light waistband, so I think I'm going to try skipping the top stitching. Okay, so now we're going to do exactly the same thing between bodice A and B. So we're going to put the zipper tape right side down on bodice A, the part with the pocket here. And you want to make sure that that pocket stays out of the way when you're sewing this zipper. You don't want to sew through it. So I'm going to tape this down here and then sandwich it with the bodice B. And then when it gets sewn, you're going to start from the bottom, sew up, and then keep sewing around that corner until it matches up with your stitches from before. Okay, so that zipper's all done. I zipped it up to show you how it works. So this facing is folded around. So I think what I'm going to do is just hand sew a few stitches just to keep it in place there so it's not flapping around. And all we've got left now is sewing the collar to the neck hole. And the tutorial suggests French seams, but with bulky fabrics I find that French seams are pretty difficult. So I'm just going to serge it and then tack the ends in place so that the serged edges aren't flapping around inside. And sewing the cuffs. So the cuffs, simple, you just sew the side seam, fold it together, and then you're going to mark the seam and the opposite side of the seam with clips, slip it into the end of the sleeve, stretch and sew, and that's it. Oh, one other thing is the snap I mentioned before. So I've got it marked there, so I'm going to have to install that snap. Sew the cuffs, sew my collar around the neck hole. So if you're doing a hood, then it would be the hood. And then it's done. So there we go. This is my completed Kodiak hoodie, and I've already put it through the wash to get rid of the washable marker placement marks for the pockets. So let me give you a quick look at the inside where that collar was sewn on. So you can see I serged it and then tacked it down so that it doesn't show from the outside to the facing. And the facing, I actually put some, because I didn't top stitch it, remember I said I didn't want to top stitch it because of the green color at the bottom and I wasn't sure what color to use to top stitch it. So what I actually did was I put some fusible hem tape, so a permanent fusible webbing tape, in between my facing and my main, and then I ironed it so that it's stuck down and it's not going to move. Now let's talk about the fit. So this pattern is drafted for male proportions, but as you can see, it works well with a female body as well. I did take 2 inches off of the length of this, and I straightened out the sides because the sides are tapered in for a man's broad shoulders and chest and smaller hips. So I straightened out the sides to make room for my hips, and I chose the size based on my upper bust size. You can see that the shoulder seam is quite low, but that works as kind of a drop shoulder look. You could do a narrow shoulder adjustment if you prefer. And I should mention that I am petite, so for a lot of women, the length might be just fine as is. This is my second Kodiak hoodie. The first one I made was this green one with a hood and regular welt pockets. And that one I made in one size smaller than this one, mainly because the teen sizes had a shorter length and shorter sleeves, and then that way I didn't have to adjust. My upper bust was actually in between the teen size 34 and the adult size 36. So the 34 was a bit snugger, and I decided for the next one that I wanted to go up to the 36. You can get this pattern on sale until Monday, April 11th, 2022. And if you missed this sale, I've put a link down in the description for our newsletter so that you can sign up and make sure you don't miss any further sales. Thanks for watching!